I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the trends in modern society. Maybe not so modern, they've been going on for quite a while, but it seems like there is more of a mainstreaming, at least in the US, of some of these occult trends. And occult means hidden, like I guess if you're in the medical profession, you would know that occult just means hidden. The idea of the occult is that there is hidden knowledge that's accessible to those who are willing to put in the effort, pay the price, whatever. And generally it's been associated with things like Satanism, magic, witchcraft, all that kind of stuff. And and I think that's it's pretty much accurate. There's a sort of a connection between the occult and technology, because if you think about it, both of them are trying to do the same thing. Both of them are trying to gain some kind of mastery over, in the case of technology, over the physical environment. In the case of the occult, it's more over the spiritual environment, but still with reference to the physical environment. I mean, you want to do magic, so you can call to your aid spiritual forces or whatever, but you want them to do things in this world. And so we have, in this case, it's kind of a, I don't know, just it also has the in both cases, to some degree, it gives you the feeling of being in the know. You know things that other people don't know. If you say, "Oh, I'm a witch," or "I'm a warlock," or something, then yeah, you're just different from other people, and you know things they don't. You have experiences they don't, and so on and so forth. So, and then if you are a computer scientist or a game programmer or whatever, or even an engineer. Of course, engineers are, I guess, more common. The point being that you are part of the movers and shakers of the world. You make the world happen. Okay, now, so the idea is that you put in the effort and the knowledge and so on. And so there is a kind of a connection between the occult and the technological. The difference is that the technological is based on what you might call a newer form of science than the occult, whereas the occult is based on a form of science which we could call pre-scientific or alchemy or magic or whatever. Our new form of science is based on the scientific method and testability and so on and so forth. And so it works better because it's more in touch with reality, in my view. The problem, of course, is that there is a spiritual reality, and if you're not careful, as you get into the occult, you can get in touch with that spiritual reality, much to your chagrin. Actually, you really don't want to be involved with that spiritual reality because it will bite you. Anyway, I don't mean to make light of it. I believe it is there, and you do put yourself in a position to be affected by it to a greater or lesser degree. Now I should say my own personal experience. I don't have any personal experience with demon possession or anything like that. I've never seen any magic actually work or anything like that. I've never seen any spiritual, well, I shouldn't say this. I mean, I have seen things happen in my life, and other people have told me about things where it did seem like God was taking an active interest in the proceedings and affecting them in response to prayer and so on. So I definitely do believe in the supernatural. I do believe that God does this. I do believe that the Bible talks about satanic and evil spiritual forces, and so but I haven't seen it myself. But I can say I know people who have, and maybe some of you have, I don't know, but I'm not going to be able to say this stuff happens for sure because I've seen it, all right? Anyway, I wanted to read a couple of things and show you a couple of things about the occult in modern society. So there was a New York Times article. This stuff, I did this talk in 2017. Sorry. Not that long ago. So 2017, before the pandemic. So there's a New York Times article called "The Season of the Witch," and it says, on a Wednesday evening last week, I sat in on a class called Witchcraft 101, Curses, Hexes, and Jinxes at Catland, a fashionable occult boutique in Bushwick, Brooklyn. More than a dozen people, most of them young women, sat in folding chairs in the store's black-walled event space. The instructor was one of Catland's co-owners, Dakota Bracchiale, a charismatic, foul-mouthed, 28-year-old former MAC makeup artist. I don't know what MAC stands for. Dressed in flowing black with a beard and long lavender nails. Beard makes me think the person is male, but don't hold me to that. I don't know. Anyway, if you're not ready to admit that the universe is chaos, I'm not sure how far you're going to go, Bracchiale said to the class, describing witchcraft as a way to exercise power in a world without transcendent moral rules, a supernatural technology for taking care of yourself when no one else will. Witchcraft, Bracchiale said, lets you be the arbiter of your own justice. Well, that's pretty clearly along the lines of modern, modern self-centered morality, the will to power. I'm the definition of all things, and so on and so forth. It's certainly an obvious outgrowth of the way people think these days. So this is from CNSnews.com. Washington Post religion editor is occultist, curses people. Okay, so Connie Schultz writes, like mother, like daughter. I guess she's writing a biography of some woman, and she's talking about her daughter, the daughter of the woman she's writing the biography of. In some of the most troubling passages of this book, she, Sally Quinn, describes casting hexes on people who later died. Now, this is the religion editor of the Washington Post, right? The religion editor. And the kind of religion she apparently finds compelling is one that allows her to curse people and kill them supernaturally. Anyway, one was an attractive young woman who flirted with one of Quinn's earlier boyfriends. I won't say exactly what I did, states Quinn. Even now, I think that would be bad luck for me. But I practiced what I learned and observed. I worked on the hex for several days until I felt that it would have some effect. It did, she claims, reports Schultz. The woman committed suicide. Quinn vowed never to cast a hex on someone else, a promise she did not keep. So apparently she cast several hexes on people. Oops. Hi, Brad. So we're talking a little bit about what I call the mainstreaming of the occult. So, and in an introductory vein. Okay, this is about someone who was a religion editor of the Washington Post. She used to cast hexes on people and try to kill them through supernatural means. And she thought it worked. She did it 3 times and thought it worked all 3 times. So, I don't know. This is one of those things where what can you say? I would think that if such a person was doing this outwardly, it would be, I don't know. I mean, it would not be a good thing. So, in other words, what should the state, what should the legal system do about stuff like this? Anyway. MarketWatch.com, millennials adopting a cult. When Coco Lane, a Brooklyn-based producer, meets someone new these days, the first question that comes up in conversation isn't where do you live or what do you do, but what's your sign? Man, this is so 70s, Anyway, so many millennials read their horoscopes every day and believe them, said Lane, who is involved in a number of non-religious spiritual practices, said. It is a good reference point to identify people and place in the world. Identify and place people in the world. Meanwhile, more than half of young adults in the U.S. believe astrology is a science. I think they just might be confused and think that they're talking about astronomy, but who knows? Compared to less than 8% of the Chinese public. The psychic services industry, which includes astrology, aura reading, mediumship, tarot card reading, and palmistry, among other metaphysical services. Anyway, metaphysical services grew 2% between 2011 and 2016. It is now worth $2 billion annually, according to industry analysis firm Ibis World. Okay, so that's a lot of money, Okay, so here is a drag queen story time at a public library. And this is being done by Xochi Mochi, okay? And so Xochi Mochi dresses up like that. It's actually a demon and comes in and reads stories to children. I'm not going to comment about it, but let me just read the article. Transvestite Xochi Mochi dressed as a satanic clown. That's why people are afraid of clowns, Anyway, with red-tipped demon horns and read to little children for Drag Queen Story Hour at the Michelle Obama Public Library in California. Anyway, DQSH captures the imagination and play of the... I can't read this. Kids are able... Okay. So Xochi Mochi said, Xochi has never been an alter ego, but more of an extension of myself. So this is a person who was... he was asked a number of questions about himself. I don't have the whole article here, but I remember that he was a drug user and he was not all right up there, and he said that he probably did too much drugs and he probably was not in touch with reality. And so anyway, this is not helping him. But the point is that this person was being put forth as a kind of role model for kids, which, man, I'm sorry. And they say J.D. Vance is weird. I'm sorry. Oh, he's the vice presidential candidate with Trump. And they were saying, oh, this guy's weird. They had a picture of him with his wife and 2 kids. Weird. This is the normal thing. It's hard for me not to anyway. So that gets better. A group was trying to donate this to be put in the capital of one of the state governments. I forget which one. And I think they ended up, I think what happened was somebody went and smashed it, and considered it to be a demonic idol. So this is Bahamut. And Bahamut is, these are 2 children there with Bahamut. And Bahamut is kind of an icon of Satan. anyway, that's kind of the thing that was going on, or is going on, or what I call me. Oh, and then of course we have our friend down in the central San Jose Park there, not too far away from here. Good old Quetzalcoatl, you know. And anyway, the less said, the better. All right, so I'm not going to talk about how it came about. I just wanted to kind of give you some idea of the kind of things that are in the public gestalt, the mindset of people in our contemporary society. I do want to talk about some stuff that's more in line with what's going on in Revelation. So I had this interesting connection between let's see here. Yeah. So this is convergence of occult and technology. And so mainstreaming the occult prepares people for supernatural phenomena. And of course, the media is full of it, right? There are all kinds of shows and things that talk about, weird spiritual phenomena, occult phenomena, things like that. Some are, all in fun, like Psych. How many of you have watched Psych? A few, yeah. I mean, the whole point of that is there isn't really any, psychic powers. But, it's kind of funny when I remember watching one of the episodes and this guy was a werewolf, right? And so they go out into the forest and they hear or see or someone they think is a werewolf. What are their names? I forget their names, but Gus is one of them. The other guy, I can't remember his name. Anyway, they run like heck from this werewolf, which of course is a supernatural phenomenon. Anyway, but mainstreaming the occult prepares people for supernatural phenomena. So this is one of the theories I was running with, was that elimination of prayer in schools, because I lived through that. And it seems to me that, I don't know if it was, there was certainly a correlation, but a correlation between kind of the disintegration of what you would call the moral consensus of the United States and the elimination of prayer in schools. Obviously, that doesn't mean that's, what caused what? Maybe the moral consensus may have already been breaking down, and that caused the elimination of prayer in schools, or vice versa. I don't know. Probably the moral consensus was already breaking down, because a lot of stuff was going on. That was early in the 60s, so I don't know. It could have gone either way. But anyway, definitely there was an association of eliminating prayer in the schools. And as a result, people didn't come out of the schools with a default view that there was a God anymore, And so a lot of the techies that are the well-known techies are atheists, or may have non-traditional views, Buddhism or whatever. I remember one guy in a discussion we were talking about, it was in a techie news group, but we were talking about God, and one guy said, well, if you guys are going to talk about God, I'm going to talk about my religion. And it turned out that his religion was tantric sex. And I thought, okay, we probably don't need to talk about this. But anyway, but a lot of the old school techies are believers, such as any of you heard of Donald Knuth? He's the guy who, he's the guy who did tech, the thing I use this all the time, tech and law tech, and he wrote pretty much the defining book on computer science called The Art of Computer Science, I think. It's a textbook, and And anyway, he was really well known. And then there's a guy named Guy Steele. He was one of the perpetrators. Well, he was one of the original forces behind the programming language Lisp. And when he went on to bigger and better things, he helped perpetrate the Java programming language, unfortunately. So how the mighty have fallen. But he was a believer. But, and you know, if you say Guy Steele among a bunch of older computer scientists, they'll all know who you're talking about. If you say Donald Knuth, they're sure to know who you're talking about. Though the younger generation may not know about this. I don't know. Most of the techies these days are either atheists or have some non-traditional religion, even a cult, as I've already mentioned. Okay, so this is Revelation 13, 11, and 12. And I saw another beast rising from the earth and having 2 horns like a lamb. And he was speaking like a dragon. And he executes the power of the first beast before him. And he was causing the world and all who dwell in it to worship the first beast, who was healed of his mortal wound. Now, what we have here, we'll talk about this in more detail in a bit. So I'm going to kind of leave this alone, but let's continue. And he does great signs so that he even makes fire to fall down from heaven, i.e. the sky, onto the earth before men. And he deceives those living on the earth through the signs which were given him to do before the beast, telling those living on the earth to make an image of the beast who had the sword wound and lived. And it was given to him to give breath, pneuma, to the image of the beast, so that it should both speak and make whoever would not worship the image of the beast to be put to death. Okay, this is significant that he makes the image of the beast to speak, okay? And we'll get to this in a minute. And he makes everyone, the great and the small, the rich and the poor, the slave and the free, that they should receive a mark on their right hand or upon their forehead, so that they may neither buy nor sell unless they have the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. So this is a mark of the beast, okay? Here is wisdom. The one having understanding, let him calculate the number of the beast. Oh man, don't you guys want to know the number of the beast and what's going on there? I mean, I'm sure that most of you are here just because of that, right? Anyway, his number is 666. And then, so it's the number of a man. Okay, this is important. It's not a spiritual being. So 666 is a gematria. That is a number that codes letters, or letters that code a number. So the number itself is Chi Psi Sigma. I don't know if I spelled that right, but anyway, Chi Psi Sigma. And that's 666, all right? 666. And so how does that work? It's actually complicated. And the reason this is one of the things that convinces me that John was writing in code, because he didn't want people to know who he was talking about. And so, so how does this work? Well, it turns out 666, and we're going to get into this later. 666 is a number of Nero's name, Kesar Neron, in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, and I'm going to go into detail on this later, but it was if you take Kesar Neron, that's that, and you put it in Hebrew and add up the Hebrew letters, treating them as numbers, you get 666. So that number 666 represents Nero. Why Nero? He is the first emperor to claim to be God while alive. And there's even more about Nero we'll go into later. Nero is unique. He started something, but he was unique in the way he did it. Okay, so here's a couple of quotations I wanted to read to you so you guys could see how there is a kind of convergence here. we're talking about artificial intelligence. And here's something Elon Musk said, summoning the demon. I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I had to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight, maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure we don't do something very foolish. With artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Doesn't work out. Okay, so this is Elon Musk of all people, right? Of course, he's kind of gone with the flow because he's a businessman. You got to compete, but this is his thoughts about artificial intelligence. Some of you may have heard of Sam Harris. Anybody? Sam Harris? The End of Faith. A couple of books he wrote. He's not as popular these days. Kind of went off. Well, anyway, he's not as popular. But anyway, he said, the moment we admit that information processing is the source of intelligence, that some appropriate computational system is the basis of what intelligence is, which, by the way, is by no means non-controversial. So this is an assumption. Anyway, it's non-controversial what he just said. And we admit that we will improve these systems continuously. Again, definitely controversial. Did I say non-controversial before? These are highly controversial statements he's making here. Many knowledgeable people strongly disagree with these statements. But anyway, if you make these assumptions, and we admit that we will improve these systems continuously, and we admit that the horizon of cognition very likely far exceeds what we currently know. Now that's not that controversial, at least for Christians. Then we have to admit that we're in the process of building some sort of God. Now think about that from Sam Harris, who is an atheist. He's one of the new atheists. He's one of these guys who used to sit around critiquing, all of the creationism and so on and so forth. And he says, we're building God. Sam Harris says that. And then we have Anthony Lewandowski, who started the Church of AI, which I haven't heard of in a long time, so there may not exist anymore. But a former Google executive is so inspired by artificial intelligence that he's creating its first church. Anthony Lewandowski says AI should be seen as a god because it is smarter than any human being. It's not a god in the sense that it makes lightning or causes hurricanes. But if there is something 1 billion times smarter than the smartest human, what else are you going to call it? Lewandowski told Wired magazine. So, this is interesting because this is straight up idolatry. Worshiping the works of your hands, right? And a computer is the works of human hands to one degree or another, all right? Okay, well, so then we have the mark. I called this the mark. This is a tattooable, I think this is a biometric sensor, but I called it a tattooable RFID, maybe because I didn't quite know what I was talking about. Anyway, this is tattooable. It'll go on your arm, your wrist, wherever. You can put it on your forehead, I suppose. Though I don't know, man. Anyway, so, and this was back in 2013. So this is over 10 years old technology. Consider what we could do now. And the statement was made that you can make it any shape and that younger people would be more inclined to like it because they like tattoos. So I guess, I've seen a lot of people, Christians and so on, get tattoos of Christian themes and such. Anyway, so, it used to be if you're an Old Testament, if you're a Jew or an Israelite, you're told not to get tattoos and not to cut yourself and stuff like that. So I'm not quite sure why. But nowadays we don't seem to, it's become, I don't know, it's become a culturally accepted. Okay, then cashless society. So Sweden is close to it. Now this was in 2017 when I wrote this. Sweden is close to a cashless society. Only 1.5 of GDP is cash. Globalists advocate for a cashless society. Why? Ostensibly because terrorism, tax evasion, drug war, and so on. The Bank of America president, again, this was in 2017, called for a cashless society. Though I can see why he might, have a vested interest in that. But he's not the only one. Well, this is in 2019, I guess. Interesting. So this is the last piece of the puzzle of Revelation 13. If you have, a cashless society means all money is government money. The government controls all the money. You cannot spend, buy or sell without the government knowing about it. Okay, so privacy, economic privacy, is totally gone. And that's the whole point, right? The government would like to eliminate the underground economy, okay? That every transaction would be taxed. The government would get its cut, tyrannical, but what's more, it makes possible control, and that control is, so the idea here is you have the cashless society where the government can control the flow of money, your ability to make economic transactions, and then the tattooable RFID, which is a biometric identifier, you can use that. The combination of the two means that you can access your money through a mark tattooed onto you. Jeremiah was saying you could do it with fingerprints, but that's it may well be that the idea of the biometric identifier is you can't cut somebody's hand off and use the hand as, so because the biometric identifier could allow you to prove that you were alive or something like that. I don't know, whatever. It's all speculation. But anyway, the point is the combination of the two, whatever form it takes, gives the government complete control over your ability to conduct economic transactions. And that means that if they turn you off, you can't buy or sell, which is exactly what it was talking about in Revelation 13. Now, I want you to think about the correlation of the artificial intelligence with the image of the beast that can talk, right? Which was the goal of artificial intelligence for many years, was to make a talking computer, basically, one that could pass what was called the Turing test, which is the ability to carry on a conversation that was indistinguishable from a human conversation, okay? That nobody could tell the difference, all right? I think they're pretty close nowadays with the large language models, though I haven't tried it myself in that way. But I think people are still saying you can tell the difference. I can certainly tell the difference. Well, anyway, I won't worry about that. The point being that the idea is the computer, the artificial intelligence, the work of our hands could speak just like a human being. And it says that the beast was given the power. The image of the beast was given the power to have breath and speak. And then, of course, the mark, which allows being able to prohibit people from buying and selling unless they had the mark. Okay, these are both things that have come together. In other words, the way I put it is, in the infamous words of the $6 million man, we have the technology, So, anyway, let's go back and look at part 4 now. Let's look at Revelation 13 in more detail. So that was all preliminary, kind of a long preliminary. I was kind of hoping we'd get through chapter 14, and I don't think we will. Let's just try to at least get through chapter 13. Otherwise, it'll be kind of hopeless. So this is from chapter 12, actually. The dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Okay, we already talked about that. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Can someone read this for us? I'm not going to talk much about it, but I just want to get us back into context here. Can someone read this?
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?"
Okay, so keep in mind that these beasts are empires or I don't know, we might call them nations or whatever. And notice that this particular beast has plays the role of Christ or the Son of God for the Trinity. Okay, he's given the authority of the Father, and he's given the ability to speak for the Father, and so on and so forth. And Christ, obviously, Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. And this beast has some kind of mortal wound on one of its heads. You notice it's kind of a cheat here, because it says one of its heads has a mortal wound. And then it got healed, and everybody says, "Whoa, look at that." And so it's supposed to be, because it's a mortal wound, it's supposed to be similar to Jesus rising from the dead. But you notice it didn't actually die. It just you want to almost say it kind of pretended to die in a way. At least it's not the reality of resurrection from the dead. It's an imitation, okay? Everything about the dragon, the beast, and the first and second beast, or the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, are imitations. And then, of course, the great whore, which is the imitation of the bride of Christ, which is the church. And we'll see how that works in a bit. Maybe not tonight. Okay, so they're really impressed with the beast because it can fight, I mean, military power is where it's at, right? And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. So this is clearly anti-God, right? And if you think about it, nowadays there is a lot of, if you think about the 20th century, the great totalitarian dictatorships were all atheistic, right? I mean, Napoleon was supposed to at least have believed in God, right? Though the French Revolution was atheistic. But apparently Napoleon believed in God, though he was very similar in some ways to the 20th century dictatorships. But he believed in God, whereas Lenin and Stalin and Hitler himself is highly ambiguous. He played the God card for the sake of gaining the allegiance of the Germans but in his private conversation, he wanted nothing to do with religion. He wanted to destroy religion because he saw it as something that weakened the German people, okay? So Hitler, he had a two-face, right? The outer face, which was somewhat pietistic, though not particularly Christian, and then the inner, his real thoughts, which were strongly anti-God. Anyway, so one of the characteristics of the beast here is its opposition to God. And if you think about it, one of the defining characteristics of the more modern 20th century and following governments has been pretty much, if not explicit atheism, at least a very strongly neutral or even hostile view of religion. Okay, China is like that. The United States got sort of dumped into that through a bunch of legal manipulations. It wasn't supposed to be like that, but and I'm not going to go into the politics of it. I just think that if you read the First Amendment, the idea that the First Amendment would limit the actions of the people is absolute nonsense if you read it, because the only thing the First Amendment applies to is Congress, which is prohibited from making a law that establishes a religion or prohibits free access or free exercise of religion. So Congress is basically not able to legislate in the area of religion. But where is the congressman in the public school? Is a teacher a congressman? Is a teacher a legislator? I mean, the whole thing is it's a bluff. And so the entire country has been bluffed into losing control of the educational environment for its own children under the idea that somehow the Constitution prohibits it, which it doesn't. It just prohibits legislation in that area. And the intent of that is to preserve the liberties of the individual people, okay? It's beating a dead horse. But the point is that the Constitution was never intended to do that. And Jefferson himself, when he used the phrase wall of separation, was actually reassuring a Christian group that the government would never interfere with its practices, okay? And it has turned out that the way it's been interpreted has been wherever government goes, religion has to vacate. So government gets into the public school, religion has to exit the public school, you see. And whatever, Yeah, like I said, it's a dead horse. But it implies that we as Christians who care about the religious upbringing, I use that in a generic sense, the Christian upbringing of our kids, we have to be very proactive. We have to say, the public school is not our friend. The public school is not going to do that job for us in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it will undermine that. I specifically remember when I was doing Sunday school some years ago, a girl comes up to me and says, "My French teacher told us that there's no God." And I thought, I guess French language gives you a lot of metaphysical insight, doesn't it? And I thought, man, let's say I were teaching Spanish and I said there is a God, I'd probably get fired, But, anyway, whatever. The point being that the public schools have often undermined and gone about deliberately undermining the faith of the students and have prohibited the students from exercising their faith. Okay, so government, so remembering that the beasts are nations or governments or spiritual entities with human organizations with spiritual focuses, that would explain how a lot of our governments in the 20th century and 21st centuries have been strongly opposed to God, okay? Even when they have the form of godliness but deny the power thereof, as many of our public officials have done. Yeah, I ended up talking about politics there, didn't I? Okay. We talked about this last week a little bit. Now, also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world and in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. And I mentioned that that's garbled pretty fiercely, but we'll not worry about that tonight. Okay, so it was allowed to make war on the saints, that is, the Christians, and to conquer them. And you can see that throughout the 20th century and the 21st, Christians have basically been conquered by, the what you might call the globalist consensus, if you want to for lack of a better word. Pretty much everywhere Christianity has been either actively persecuted or marginalized to a greater or lesser degree. Okay, and you guys may recall when what was it? Remember when the guy who on the Kansas City, I forget what position, was he a kicker or what? I don't remember. Anyway, he made some comments basically saying how, he had his wife was his biggest support, and she, I guess wanted to be a housewife and so on and so forth. And it's like all hell broke loose. Well, all hell broke loose, and people were just saying, wow. And they were criticizing the team, and they're criticizing Kansas City for having this guy on the. I mean, it was like this guy had no right to say this, right? In many people's minds, Which to me, if you ask, you ask yourself, what's going on there? Well, it's exactly this. There is a supernatural power that is fighting against Christianity, and it mobilizes. It fights through mobilizing the opinions and laws and actions of countries throughout the world. Okay, it's interesting to me that China used to be tolerant of Christianity. When I say tolerant, I don't mean legally tolerant, and the Christians were always quite vulnerable. Like if there was some party official that didn't like Christianity, he could have your church bulldozed or whatever. But you could have churches as long as they kind of kept a low profile and didn't make waves and so on. And I've heard many stories about this, but as time's gone on, it's been more and more like active persecution. I mean, I could tell you stories about that where Christians went to China and pretty much openly, evangelized, and even in Chinese schools, they were invited to evangelize in schools. But nowadays that would be pretty much impossible. Though I suppose that again, it would depend on, what part of the country. But again, you'd be very vulnerable. Anyway, I use China as just one example. There are many. Even a place like Taiwan, which doesn't oppose Christianity. My understanding is that Taiwan is one of the least Christian countries of the Western. Yes. Oh yeah, Muslim country definitely. Oh sure. Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, that's really explicit. Do not, and India, for example, has laws against evangelization and so on and so forth. Proselytization, they call it, and they're not Muslim, but they're Hindu, and so you go throughout the world, and Christianity is either legally or legally proscribed, or it's considered, it's kind of like having a disease or something, a disfiguring disease. I'm a Christian. I'm sorry to hear that, kind of thing, right? So anyway, and that's the state of things as it is. And so those of you who are younger, like me, if the Antichrist shows up soon, I may not be able to buy and sell, but I can live off my stored resources for a while. Anyway. No, just kidding. My life is mostly gone, but many of you will have to confront that, probably will have to confront the worst of it, the actual persecution and legal strictures that will come down against you, Anyway. Again, if anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain by the sword, with the sword he must be slain. So this is just simply saying that this is going to happen. God is not going to step in and put a stop to it. You might say, why not? It's because this is what humanity has chosen. Humanity has chosen to follow the beast. Okay, and so here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So you guys have to stick it out. You have to hang on to your faith. Abide in Christ. Don't leave. He who endures to the end will be saved. But it might be pretty hard. You might find actual active persecution. But it does say, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And Christ goes on to say, blessed are you when all men persecute you and say evil things against you for my sake. For great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So anyway, persecution is an utter disaster, right? It's a tragic disaster. Because it means, your life is going to suck, right? Well, yeah, but God is saying, I get it. And you're not the first to go through this. And I'll make it worth your while. Everything where you're persecuted, I will more than compensate you for, okay? So hang in there, hang tough. Strength, strength in the Lord. All right, can someone read this for us? Go ahead, Nick.
Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, with whose mortal wound was healed. It performed great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image up for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived.
Okay, now this is a beast that rises out of the earth, okay? And notice it has horns like a lamb and speaks like a dragon. So what's the idea behind that image? Why horns like a lamb?
Imitating Jesus, the Lamb of God.
Okay.
Counterfeit.
Definitely a counterfeit. So the idea would be it's a kind of another imitation of, because the other one, the first beast is kind of the imitation of Christ, because it plays the corresponding role of Christ in the unholy Trinity. I think this one, again, yeah. So we also know that the Spirit is the Spirit of Christ. So there is that element of that. I was just thinking, you're probably right that this is. See, I consider this one to play the role of the Spirit, and it's a false prophet as well, because and the horns of the Lamb would be that it is kind of like the other beast, except the other beast is not like a lamb. So I would just say this: it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's innocent. It has the horns of a lamb. They're harmless, right? Little tiny horns, right? And then it speaks like a dragon, so it's got a voice that is very powerful and compelling. That's the way I would see it. It exercises all the authority of the first beast, makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. So this plays exactly the role of the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit tries to get people to worship Christ, okay? The Holy Spirit points believers at Jesus. So through the Spirit, we worship the Father through the Son by the Spirit. Yeah, might have that turned around. Anyway, so the idea here, though, is that the second beast, or this beast, causes people to worship the first beast, which is a similar role of the Holy Spirit. And it performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. Now, I want you to think about that sign, okay? Let me ask you this. Could we do this today? Well, yeah, easily, right? In fact, someone was describing the firing of the A-10 gun. You guys know the A-10? How many of you know what I'm talking about, A-10 fighter? The A-10 it's actually a ground attack plane that the U.S. has used since, I don't know, for quite a while now. And it's basically an airplane built around a gun. And so you know that one? Yeah. And it's a flying tank, they call it. And so they said that at night it looked like, because it has tracer rounds, it looked like a ray gun shooting to the earth, So, I mean, we can do all kinds of stuff, fire from heaven, nuclear bombs, whatever. We can do all of this. The point is, can we do it the way God does it? No, because that's supernatural. We can make it look that way. So remember, these are all imitations. These are not the real thing. These are false things. So the fire coming down from heaven to earth in front of people, we can do that. Just like the magicians in Egypt could perform the signs of Moses, right? Many of them. And it was allowed to work these signs in the presence of the beast and deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and lived. So there was this whole idea of making an image. And why make an image? Any thoughts on why make an image? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of crazy in a way, but it seems to me that God said, don't make an image, right? And so if God says, don't make an image, they're going to make an image, If you can't, the idea is to encourage people to worship what they make with their hands, the thing also that they can see. So the characteristics of the idolatry are you make it yourself and you pour your own power of worship into it, and thereby betray the true God, who is the only one worth worshiping. Okay? So they make the image, and what's more, we'll see what happens next. This is what we talked about before. Can someone read this part?
And it was allowed to give bread to the image of the beast, so that the things of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it caused all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast or number of its name.
Okay, do you guys remember anything like this scene in the Old Testament? In the Old Testament, they put it to music. Sackbut. I'm trying to think. That's the only instrument I can remember is sackbut. Lyre, I don't know. Every kind of... Anyway, it's the image that Nebuchadnezzar had made, right? And they were supposed to worship it, and if they didn't, they would be killed. Okay, so again, we have this, and of course here we have the image speaking. So Nebuchadnezzar's image couldn't speak. This one can. So this is like, again, I'm arguing that we could do something like this easily with our current technology, okay? And if you think about it, I mean, this picture here that John is giving, it's really weird that, it would be, he wrote this back in the 1st century, and we could imagine it happening now by how it could happen, okay? Now you could say, well, of course it could happen through supernatural means, but the whole point here is that Satan is acting through human means, okay? And now we could actually do this through human means. Okay. And again, there's you have to be marked, and you can't buy or sell without the mark. Okay, so, this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of the man, and his number is 666. And this is a gematria, and you can see the Hebrew lettering there. So Hebrew is written back, from right to left. So this is Kesar. I don't remember the names of the letters now, but this is a Q, the equivalent of Q. That's an S. This is an R. And there's a vowel. There are vowel points in there, but I didn't write them. So Ksar Neron, and so that's the way that works as far as the Hebrew itself. It doesn't matter, but the letters represent numbers, and so Ksar is 100 plus 60 plus 200, and Ksar obviously is Caesar, right? So Caesar it's interesting. Caesar. There are all kinds of remnants of the word Caesar. For example, Kaiser, right? Kaiser meant Caesar. Tsar meant Caesar, like the ruler of Russia was a Tsar or a Caesar. The ruler of Germany was a Kaiser or a Caesar, and so on and so forth. So that that word has actually penetrated the Western consciousness. Anyway, Ksar, there's something to be said about that, okay? At the point I'm going to make here. And the Neron is Nero. So you add all this up, you get 666. And why? Why Nero? Hi, Lawrence. Well, it's emperor worship, or essentially government worship, okay? That is worship of the government. Government wants to be God. Government wants to take the place of God, all right? Or claims godly power, whatever. And so it turns out that the Nero cult was prominent in the eastern part of the empire. It was more prominent in the east than in the west, because the closer you got to Rome, the better a look you got at Nero and the less likely you were inclined to worship him, right? But in the east, and the east was generally more superstitious. And there was a legend, the Nero Redivivus legend, which was literally that Nero would rise again. And this is so, you can hardly come at a more obvious antichrist thing going on there, right? Nero was antichrist because people thought he had the attributes and authority of Christ, including rising from the dead, And so Nero was the first emperor who, like I said, claimed to be God while he was alive. At least that may not be true, but it was certainly important. And the Christians would be prosecuted legally for not sacrificing to Nero, to the emperor. And then again, so I'm just going to say the English. Q is 100. So in Hebrew and in Greek, they didn't have numerals. And well, you see in Roman numerals, right? The letters are numbers, are numerals. They stand for numbers. Whereas, we have the Arabic numerals where they're not letters, they're actual numerals that stand directly for the numbers. But in these, in the earlier languages, written languages, they would have letters stand for numerals, and they'd make it clear by context. So that's how you get. So now the interesting thing to understand here's the way it works. You've got this number, which was actually written in Greek, okay? That is, the numerals were written in the Greek numerals, okay? 666. So that's, okay, what does 666 stand for? Gee, I don't know. What could it stand for? No clue. People have wondered they've speculated, right? They even came up with things like Henry Kissinger or something, I remember that. But the only one who can figure this out is somebody who knows Hebrew. See, and that's a safety feature. By writing it in Greek, but it only works if you know Hebrew, then nobody can say to John, they won't arrest John and chop his head off, because this is subversive stuff. This is politically subversive, you see. This is why I say John wrote the book of Revelation in code, and here's one of the strongest versions of code. So if you know Hebrew, you can figure it out. You can say, gee, Nero is the emperor. Kesar Neron, oh, that's the emperor. Oh, gee, if I add Kesar Neron up, I get 666, and there it is, So you see, that's how you can figure out. But you notice, this is the red part here. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of the man, and his number is 666. So John is basically giving you a lot of clues there, but it's still hidden, okay? So this is the contemporary figure that is most likely to be to work for. It's the most likely. I'm pretty. Not everybody buys this, if you look on the net about this, you'll see that this is suggested, but some people say, nah, this can't be right. But I find it pretty convincing. I'm about 90% plus on being convinced by this, okay? So the point is, though, that, Kesar Neran, which is the Hebrew for Caesar Nero, translates easily into 666, which is the number given in Greek. So it's kind of like the Da Vinci Codes in a way. Any of you guys read the Da Vinci Codes? How many of you read the Da Vinci Codes? I mean, it's a terrible book, terrible. But what was interesting about it was they had all these little puzzles, and the reason I kept reading the book was I wanted to solve the puzzles, And so, this is like a puzzle like that, okay? All right. I think we'll stop here. So are there any questions and comments about what we talked about? I know this was kind of a wild ride, wasn't it? Maybe a little bit.
So it's interesting to me because I assume you believe that Revelation was written about in the 90s?
No, I actually think it was written earlier than that. I think so. Now, I could be wrong. I don't remember what I actually said earlier. I think it was probably written in the 60s. Yeah, I might be wrong though.
And when did Nero?
Nero was. Remember, Nero was the emperor when Paul was killed, so it's a similar time frame. Yeah. Though by this time, Nero is probably more of the Nero redivivus idea. Maybe he's already died, but there's the legend that he'll rise again, So that's quite. So Revelation, was it written before or after the fall of the temple? One of the interesting questions for all of the New Testament books is, were they written before or after the fall of the temple? AD 71, yeah. And obviously, this is one of those things where many of the so-called scholars will date the books where Jesus predicts the fall of the temple after the fall of the temple, because after all, prediction, what the authors did was they wrote that in there to make it look like Jesus was actually predicting the fall of the temple. But you can't, predictions like that are impossible, so it must have been written after the fall of the temple. That's a kind of a circular reasoning. Anyway, so, but like, for example, Mark or Luke or whoever, talk about the fall, Jesus predicting the fall of the temple, or Matthew 24, none of the stones will be left on each other. And of course the temple was torn down and destroyed. So the question is, and so people have tended to date those books after the fall of the temple. I don't buy it. I mean, the only reason to date them like that is because you don't believe that Jesus actually could predict the temple falling, which if you assume he could, there's no other, you can certainly make them that early. Yeah. Any other questions along those lines or of any sort?
So because people will have, kind of along the lines of what Brad was asking, because people will have different takes on when Revelation was written, if people hold to a later date, then do they ascribe the 666 to someone other than Nero?
Well, I haven't seen, I don't recall the math, but it might be Domitian. But I don't remember seeing any analysis that gives him 666. So it might be that just slipped my mind. Yeah.
And will 666, do you believe the 666 will have significance in our
Well,
in our future?
well, I think that so I think it's a principle. Like, what is 666? So here's the logic. Gosh, man. The logic is more complicated than I have made out, and I should have made this sooner. I've been stabbing at it, but I haven't actually said it. The logic is Nero was a divine figure. Okay, so John identifies Nero as, well, when I say he was divine, I'm not saying he was actually divine. I'm saying that he claimed divinity, okay? And that there was a cult of resurrection that grew up around him, okay? Now, the question is, how does that work for us? Well, during that time, Christians were persecuted and even killed for not worshiping the emperor, Nero, or whoever was emperor. And the tendency has been for government to claim divine honor, divine power, and a divine authority. Yeah. And what I'm saying is that Nero, the 666 represents government claiming to be God. Okay. Now, government is a valid function. Obviously, Paul in Romans 13 says government does a good thing. It rewards the good and suppresses the evil. Okay. That's the legitimate role of government, is to reward people who do well and prevent people who do evil from doing evil, okay? It should probably not be doing many other things, but it has always... But see, government obviously will tend to expand its power because mankind wants to have, and of course being satanically inspired, we will seek to have, the kingdoms of this world. Satan will kind of dangle them in front of us, like he did with Jesus, and people will grab for that, right? I mean, obviously, that's always been a powerful motivator, is power, right? Powerful motivator, yeah. So what I'm trying to say here is the picture he's painting of these beasts, right, is human entities that are seeking divine authority and power, okay? And the prototype was Nero, okay? And so when we look at Nero, we see a human being who claimed to be God and who was worshipped as God and had a hope of his resurrection or return or whatever, And so, yeah, so that's Antichrist. Antichrist does not mean against Christ. It means in place of Christ or false Christ, all right? And so anybody, and this is why, you could be against Christ all day long, but not be Antichrist. You can be honestly against him. You think he's, but it's when you, like for example, how many of you have heard of the Unification Church, Sun Myung Moon? Sun Myung Moon was an antichrist because he claimed to be Messiah. Well, Messiah is Christ, right? Now he was fortunately didn't manage to get he didn't get much traction, fortunately, and it didn't do a whole lot of damage. But it says in John, 1 John, it talks about how I've told you Antichrist is coming, and many antichrists have already come. And Jesus said, many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. Right? I mean, that's in Matthew 24. And so Jesus is saying, people are going to go around saying that they're Christ. Well, that is Antichrist. That's all there is to it. And so Antichrist is so every king can be tempted to be an Antichrist in the sense of, there was one king said, l'état c'est moi. I mean, or you think of Mussolini, everything for the state, nothing outside the state. The state with absolute power. Of course, the the Soviet Union, the absolute loyalty and to the state and all that. You have all this kind of stuff, and here's the thing: once belief in God is kind of done away with, what's left? See, if you say what is the genius of the political system of the United States? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights. Okay? Now, you think about what those words mean. It's interesting to me, by the way, that when Obama quoted the Declaration of Independence, he said, they are endowed with inalienable rights. He left something out. See, this is, so not to, maybe just had a brain fart or whatever, but the point is that by their Creator with inalienable rights, that means they cannot be taken away by human agency, means that government is subordinating itself to God, the Creator. That's the whole point of that. Now, they didn't make it explicit in the Constitution or anything like that, but the idea was that government was not God. Government was not the ultimate authority. There was always something above government, namely God. And there were things government could not do because it would involve taking away inalienable rights. It would be tyrannical. It would be wrong. Okay? Well, of course, in the 20th century, that's gone by the board increasingly in our country. And if you go around asking people, where do our rights come from? Now, I think as Christians, we just have to live for God no matter what. It's nice if our government acknowledges God, but if it doesn't, so much the worse for our government. It's not. They're responsible to God, okay, and we just have to live with it. But that's why Paul tells us, and Peter tells us, pray for our government, pray for those in power, and don't be a rebel. Paul says, don't be a rebel. Romans 13, because government serves a function in God's economy, and this, but government needs to understand, that it is not all powerful. It is not God, but it always wants to be God. You see, and so what I was saying, the United States had the idea that government was under God. Pledge of Allegiance says that, though that's the Pledge of Allegiance is kind of a bit contradictory, because you're pledging allegiance to the one nation under God. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. I mean, you're pledging allegiance to this thing which is certainly not ultimate. It's a bit idolatrous to do that. I never do that. And when people do it in Awana, I don't participate and so on, because I really feel that you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve, right? So the point is, though, that government always wants to be God. And this is what's going on here with 666, what he's talking about. And, of course, the predominance of that, the increasing tyranny, which is simply a natural, every human institution wants to expand. Nietzsche said that every form of life wants to expand and grow. It's called the will to power. This is the fundamental sin of humanity, is we want things our way. We want to be the ones that call the shots, And when you make that government, then government will want to do that. It will not want to be subordinate. So there's not much we can do about it because, like it says here earlier, right? It was allowed, the beast was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. See, so at some point we're going to lose this battle because in human terms we can't win it. Even as Christians believing in God, because God is going to allow sin and evil to basically express itself, okay? In fact, the whole end times is a gradual expression of evil to a great lesser and lesser restrained degree, okay? There'll be less and less restraints. So that we, because this is judgment. This is judgment. And how can you judge what you have not taken the full measure of, you see? So evil is to be judged by allowing it to be fully what it is, you see? And that implies being able to overcome the saints, us, right? And then we'll see how much fun life is when that happens. Okay. Any more questions? We'll see you next week. We're making progress here.